I want to welcome everyone. We have seen quite a strong turnout for this webinar. We want to welcome you to this webinar to look at how the recycling industry is responding to supply chain needs in the midst of this pandemic. We are all working in new ground and new situations. As we approached this early on, several of you and several in the industry lobbied very hard that recycle be considered an essential business. We were successful with that at the federal and most of the state levels because recycling is important to the supply chain for our manufacturing. However, we really haven't communicated that message all the way back to our participants in some of our frontline collection programs. And so today we want to get the industry's perspective out there and into your hands for that messaging of why it is still important to participate in recycling. This webinar is being recorded and it will be on the CERTIC website probably about the 1st of next week. You can find that in our webinar section. You as participants are muted during this. If you have questions, you do have a question box over in your control panel, and we will have time at the end of this webinar. We will get to what questions we can, and we will take the other questions and put those together into a document with the best answers we can gather for you, which will also be in the same spot in on our website in the webinar section. The chat box we will not be using as actively because we have got approaching 200 people logged on here, and that could get pretty busy. We do want to move forward. We've got 5 good speakers, and we're very honored to have our moderator, Susan Robinson, who serves on our board. Will be leading us in the webinar today. But before we start, we'd like just a little bit of information about who's here, and we've got a quick poll for you, Jen, if you could pull that up. We're just looking to see what sectors you represent, so if you participants could make your choice. Here we'll give you about 15 to 20 seconds. It shouldn't take you long to figure out which one of those you're in. All right, we have got a fairly balanced representation here. With that, I'll give you just a minute to see that. Obviously, we do have more from the government sector, but than any specific other group, but the private sector total would outnumber that. With that, I will give it over to Susan.
Great, thanks, Will. And I think I just hopefully have control of the screen here. Let's see. Yep. Great. So thank you. And thanks to CERTIC for hosting the webinar. Thanks to you all for being on it today. I think it should be real interesting to hear from our manufacturers really what's going on in their world of packaging manufacturing during a pandemic, what they've had to deal with, and really how it's going now. We've got a great panel. Plastic, paper, metal, glass, all on board today. So I'm going to start with a quick overview before I hand it off to our speakers. If I can do this. Yep. So I think, are at a unique point in time. We have the opportunity to help consumers connect the dots about why recycling is important. Instead of thinking about recycling as something that happens in our kitchens and our garages, we're seeing that placing recyclables in our cart is only the first step in the manufacturing process that we rely on for our groceries and our healthcare items, among other things. And we're reminded of this every day when we read about it in the press. At Waste Management, we were reminded of our essential role in the packaging chain when our mill customers started calling us, asking what we were going to do to ensure that we could keep their pipelines full of the essential products that they manufacture. This led to, it was fascinating actually, it was a collective aha moment for our top leaders at Waste Management and a commitment from top to bottom to do our part to help keep our nation's manufacturing industry in business. Working with our markets and trade organizations, we began in earnest to ensure that emergency orders included recycling and processing. So the information on this slide actually is from ISRI. They wrote a really nice letter to Vice President Pence explaining the importance of recycled feedstock. So once the federal government then included recycling in their guidance, then state government affairs teams, a state government needed to also include that language. So we worked with state governments across the country. And this is an example of what one state really relied on that federal order to make sure that there was language at their state level. The list of essential services is ultimately decided at the state level. So we're pleased to see this. And what was interesting about it is that it shows up in the manufacturing supply chain, not the public works supply chain necessarily. Sometimes both, but you need to look in both places to really see where our services are covered. It's a new way of thinking, but it's critical for such a prolonged impact to the manufacturing industry across the country. I have to say, I really mean this. Every time I go to the grocery store right now, I think about the complexity of the supply chain. And I say a word, kind of corny. I got a couple corny ones here. I say a word of thanks to our drivers and our MRF employees for doing their job every day. And to our manufacturers as well. Let's see here. There we go. To our manufacturers as well, who continue to make the products that we need and enjoy. We talk a lot about the paper industry right now, right? Tissue and toweling, of course, cardboard boxes for online delivery. But I received a video clip this week of a community recycling, it was a video of a community recycling collection day. And the videographer in this went to bin after cart after cart, and looking at it, every single one was full of wine bottles and beer cans, which was a really important reminder of the essential role of all these materials in our recycling programs. We've relied on recyclables as feedstock for products and packaging for decades. It's not new, but we have more visibility now. During World War II, President Roosevelt implored Americans to contribute to the war effort by recycling metals, paper, and rags. I guess I see this as sort of our World War II moment, and it's an opportunity to highlight the role of recyclables in our nation's manufacturing industry. So before I turn the microphone over to our speakers, I thought I'd offer just a few comments on the state of recycling from the MRF perspective, since MRFs feed our mills. We're receiving at the MRFs less commercial recyclables, but more residential recyclables. So this is a great opportunity to encourage residents to recycle. Demand for paper has increased. It's a great opportunity to recycle more cardboard at home and remind consumers to recycle cardboard and other paper. And since most bottle bill states have paused their programs, it's a great opportunity for bottle and can manufacturers to use more curbside material. Most bottlers and can manufacturers mostly rely on feedstock from deposit states to make new bottles and cans, while curbside bottles and cans tend to be made into textiles, cars, and piping. Since no one's buying carpets or cars right now, these industries are closing down, and MRFs are having actually a hard time selling and moving some of their bottles and cans. So this could be a great time when we sync up that curbside supply with the plastic and glass bottles and cans from the demand side. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Sean State. You read a little bit with Pratt Industries. I'll read a little bio for Sean. And we'll work our way through from paper to plastic to metals and glass, wrapping up with glass. So first, Sean. Sean has worked in the corrugated packaging and recycling industry for 26 years, and he's been with Pratt for 18 years. Sean is currently the president of Pratt Recycling, and his team has operational responsibility for 18 recycling facilities and procurement into 5 100% recycled fiber paper mills that consume over 2 million tons annually of recovered fiber. Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Let me make sure I've got control of the screen. Give me just a second here. Okay, I think I do. Okay, thank you again, Susan. want to start out and talk a little bit about who is Pratt Recycling. A number of folks on the phone or on the webinar may know who we are, but there may be a number that don't. And Pratt Recycling is one of the largest, fastest growing recycling companies in the country over the past 5 to 10 years. The picture on the top left there is a picture of our newest facility in Conyers, Georgia, a state-of-the-art material recovery facility that's attached to our paper mill in Conyers, which is attached to our box plants. And Pratt is the largest consumer of mixed paper in the country. So of the material collected at the curb, a good portion of that is mixed paper. Every bit of 50% of what is put in that bin is mixed paper. We need that as a feedstock for our mills. And again, we are the largest consumer of mixed paper in the country. In addition to mixed paper, we also utilize OCC. So we're a fairly large consumer of OCC as well. We don't have any virgin material in our process at all. So the material collected at the curb, collected in distribution centers, collected behind storefronts is very much what we need in order to run our business. So who is Pratt Industries? Well, Pratt Recycling is a division of Pratt Industries, and Pratt Industries is the 5th largest corrugated box company in the country, possibly the largest family-owned, privately held packaging business in the world. So if you look at the circular economy chart that I have here in front of you, going from top left and around to the right, Pratt collects material, and we also buy material from other recyclers and waste haulers. In some cases, it goes to our material recovery facilities where we pull out aluminum and PET. In other cases, it may go directly to the fiber yard at one of our mills, where we have old corrugated paper and old corrugated containers of mixed paper ready for the furnish in our mills. Our mills are making container board and medium, which is turned into new boxes in our box plants and then sent out to distribution to market. If you were to go into, say, any Home Depot store in the country, that Home Depot moving and storage aisle is Pratt's aisle. All those boxes are ours. We're selling into people like Amazon and Walmart and all the largest consumer products companies in the U.S. And we have a pretty big footprint nationally. So why is Pratt essential? Susan talked a little bit about how we lobbied. Susan and Will both talked a little bit about how we lobbied the national government, federal government, and the state governments to consider recycling essential. Well, we're essential because we need boxes to pack all the supplies that have to get to people. The sanitary supplies, toilet paper, paper towels, that type of thing. Food products. Food products are arriving into grocery stores and to your homes, in boxes. And then there's medical supplies. Medical supplies typically arrive in boxes. So just about everything moves in a corrugated box. And if you take that box out of the supply chain, and if you don't consider a corrugated box company essential, and then a recycling company essential, which is in that same supply chain, it'll disrupt the supply chain and keep some of this material from getting to all the folks here that are on this webinar. So why is recycling essential? I touched on it a little bit already, but recycling is really the first link in the manufacturing supply chain. Over 75% of the paper mills in the U.S. utilize recovered paper in their operations, and the recovered paper is coming from recyclers. So it's very important for those folks that are on the phone. If you have some control over recycling in your community, in your state, it's very important that you think about that, and please continue to push to recycle even in these tough times. And curbside recycling is essential. It's where the majority of the mixed paper is generated. I've mentioned that already. A large portion of OCC is collected and consumed. That's collected and consumed is generated in curbside recycling, and all this material is turned into boxes that ship essential products to the consumers and businesses. Many businesses deemed non-essential are not open and not producing recycled fiber that is needed to run the mills. So curbside recycling is important now more than ever. And again, Susan touched on it briefly. She mentioned that the commercial recycling is down. That's what I'm pointing out to when I say these businesses that are deemed non-essential. A lot of those are commercial industrial businesses that do recycle every day. And it's important that not only we get things going again as soon as we can, but it's also important that the curbside recycling is continued in all the communities across the U.S. So that said, Susan, I'm going to turn it back to you, and I'll mic my audio and video. I'll mute my audio and video.
Great. Okay. Well, if you can hear me, I'm gonna leave my video off, but I'm gonna turn it over to Greg Wall from Greif. But before I do, I want to give a little bio for Greg. Thank you for joining us. Greg is currently the general manager of the Southeast region for Greif. I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. Recycling Group. His career-long specialty is business transformation and the development of growth blueprints within global manufacturing and services enterprises. Greg, it's all yours.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi from Kennesaw, Georgia. Thank you for attending. First, a brief overview of Greif. Greif employs 16,300 colleagues in 285 production, warehouse, and office locations in 43 countries worldwide through two principal groups. Its Rigid Industrial Packaging and Services Group and its Paper Packaging and Services Group. Our vision in industrial packaging is to be the best performing customer service company in the world. In the US, Greif PPS operates 20 recycling facilities, 1 large brokerage office, 15 paper mills, as well as 43 industrial product plants. Greif Recycling is committed to fibering not only its own mills, but many of those in the industry. Today, I'd like to share with you some of the insights regarding the significance of fiber recycling in the midst of the pandemic and some of the core things that are reinforced as we go through this in the pandemic. Greif Recycling principally deals with industrial and commercial sources of fiber and dual stream residential. The past 12 months have presented an unprecedented challenge. Almost 1 year ago, China instituted national sword, largely prohibiting the import of recycled fiber, which significantly shifted global demand for OCC, old cardboard containers, generally the brown fiber that recyclers and mills need. This created a glutton supply, driving down price and realigning the playing field in recycling by reducing the number of recyclers. Decreased global demand also shifted some recycled fiber away from reuse to disposal. Almost unimaginable in the latter part of those 12 months, the pandemic has now taken a step further by constricting supply of brown fiber, ultimately required to produce packaging, potentially breaking a link in the supply chain if there is insufficient fiber to maintain packaging demand in the manufacturing and distribution sectors. The pandemic has shown how complex and interwoven our supply chain is. A single broken link in the fiber portion of the manufacturing and distribution supply chain can become a bottleneck that limits the entire supply chain from functioning. So what constructive insights have we gained as a result of experiencing this? In the midst of the challenge presented by the pandemic, Greif is reinforcing its core beliefs about our role and the importance of the solutions we offer. The need for sustainable recycling economics and environmental stewardship. As upstream source industries for fiber have gone dark, downstream supply chains are threatened. So our efforts to recycle have intensified, as have our commitment to keep our people and our work families safe, operations open, and services active. In the pandemic struggle, paper mills can be idled for lack of fiber. We are leveraging our logistics and relationships to minimize that potential. Critical products and tools needed to help those with COVID-19 and prevent its spread in the workplace and at home would not be readily available without recycled fiber to help produce the packaging required. So what are the themes, the constants that recycling must emphasize as a result? Pandemic or no pandemic, there are inseparable constants that drive the recycling business. One, the sustainability of recycling economics to drive investment, and the need for sustainable solutions to protect the environment. The economics must justify the sustainable solutions that benefit everyone. namely repurposing fiber waste and minimizing its disposal. Same applies for other materials, and I'm sure you'll hear more of that today. We face some economic headwinds in repurposing and preserving the availability of recycled fiber. The Paper Recycling Coalition, PRC, has pointed out the uneven playing field created for recycling by nature of the credits and incentives paid to those who burn collected waste, including recyclables, for waste to energy initiatives. We understand the value of burning unusable fiber, unusable paper as an alternative, but a level playing field is essential to allow the economics of the free market to work unopposed by subsidies. So how do we move forward, improve, and grow based on everything that we've dealt with? Essentially, we've been thrust into a crucible as a result of the pandemic. Susan mentioned this is our World War II moment, and I think that's very true. In response, there are dots to be connected residentially, commercially, and industrially. We believe education is key. At Greif, we put forth a great deal of effort over the course of the last 3 years, heightened in the last 12 months with the dramatic course of events we've experienced and we've talked about. And we've been educating our industrial and commercial vendor customers on the economic trade-offs of recycling versus choosing not to recycle. Our recycling economy can be more efficient and can benefit from multiple waste streams: industrial, commercial, and residential. Today, the residential stream has grown by nature of deliveries to your home from Amazon and the likes, but it has a high cost to handle, high contamination, and unfortunately, the greatest likelihood of diversion to landfill. With that backdrop, public policy, we believe, needs to deal and take a stronger stance to support recycling. And everyone plays a role in its success. So we need to teach how and why we all take part in preserving the benefits of recycling and making it more efficient and more effective. As we face economic and budgetary hurdles in the recovery from COVID-19, recycling can be a means of solidifying and strengthening the supply chain, minimizing cost and protecting the environment as a whole. Our economy will need this. Bottom line, recycling is not going away. The hope is that we'll not just want more recycled products, but we, as consumers, will demand them for the benefit of all. In closing, recycling is not just beneficial, it's absolutely necessary. And despite the destructive nature of COVID-19, the pandemic can provide the impetus to build a brighter and better future for recycled products. Thank you.
Great, Greg, thank you very much. Before we move from paper to plastic, we've got another poll that we're going to do. So, have you experienced disruption to your recycling service or drop-off redemption center as a user and/or operator? You could just click one of these. This will be interesting to get a little bit of a pulse as to what's going on out there. Give you about 20 seconds here. Yes, 36%. No, 53%. Unsure, 11%. We'll just wait another couple seconds to see if this changes very much. Great. Okay. Well, that's good. Over half. Over half anyway, things are going the same. It's interesting that 36% are seeing some sort of a disruption. That's a pretty big number, unfortunately, and hopefully it'll be all temporary. So now we're going to move on to Stephanie Baker with KW Plastics. Stephanie is the Director of Market Development for KW Plastics Recycling Division. She speaks to the economic advantages and opportunities for plastic recycling, and many of us have heard her speak, and she represents her company in the industry so well. A hometown girl from KW Plastics headquarters operations in Troy, Alabama, Stephanie represents the world's largest plastic recycler of HDPE and polypropylene in sustainability projects, packaging design, and increasing quality supply throughout North America. Stephanie, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Great. It's great to be with everyone today and have this opportunity to be able to share the plastics perspective. Make sure I've got my slides here. Here we go. As Susan said, KW Plastics, we are the world's largest plastics recycler located in Troy, Alabama. We're able to make that claim based on our large capacities to be able to both buy, process, and store for selling our resin. That has proven to be very beneficial in this COVID-19 crisis. We have been doing this for a while. The slide says 35 years. Doing my math, it's probably closer to 40 now. And we do have 350 employees that are directly tied to plastics recycling. That does not include our affiliate companies that we have, including a truck line, a molding operation that makes an all-plastic paint can, and a lead recycling operation. I am happy to report that we have had no layoffs. All 350 employees are still getting a paycheck. We have not made any changes to our operating hours, but of course we have taken some significant internal measures to be able to keep our employees safe and healthy so that we can keep producing that resin that our customers are depending on us. We've talked a lot this morning about supply chain. We consider ourselves to be right there in the middle where supply meets demand. So we purchase bales of high-density polyethylene and polypropylene from all over North America and beyond. That is our largest challenge, always has been. It comes to our facility in Troy, Alabama for washing, for reprocessing, and then our end product is a post-consumer resin pellet that is then sold to molders who are manufacturing a wide variety of applications. I'll show you just a sampling so you get an idea of who some of our customers are. Obviously, it's a lot of brands and logos you recognize there that represent diversity of applications from automotive, beauty and personal care, packaging, agriculture, durable goods, pipe, and others. We received immediately when we started seeing COVID-19 in full effect, the quarantine starting, we immediately received letters from many of our suppliers that were naming us an essential supplier, long before the federal government actually confirmed that and defined that. Obviously, with the automotive shutting down, we have seen that business come to all but an abrupt stop. We are seeing a few loads of that ship out. We are being told from our automotive industry that they are anticipating to be back up and running May 1st. We shall wait and see. None of us have our crystal balls. We are seeing any R&D work. So it takes a while for resin to be qualified to go into any new applications or any new packaging, any new design. And we have been seeing an amazing uptick of that in the past, I would say 9 to 16 months, with a lot of our brands making sustainability commitments to include more recycled content in their packaging, specifically for plastics. So we've been seeing an incredible amount of demand grow and an incredible amount of new innovation. All of that has come to a stop right now, as we are seeing our suppliers really scale back to producing the items, the products that are essential right now. And they're converting lines, and they don't have any room to introduce new products or new packaging right now. Primarily, we are seeing that demand in our natural high-density polyethylene. This is resin that we see go into personal care, household cleaning agents. You see Clorox there, Unilever, and Procter & Gamble. They're brands that all keep us clean. People are at home. They are taking more showers, particularly those that are in essential job services. And so we're seeing that there's an increased demand for detergents, for soaps, obviously for household cleaning agents. We know what the where we are there with can't keep that stuff on the shelves. So we're going to ship about 9.5 million pounds this month of our natural resin, specifically to support the household and personal cleaning and care items. That is a significant amount for us in that particular resin, but overall that's significantly lower than what we would ship as throughout our whole product line. So looking ahead, what does this mean for plastics specifically? You know, if you have read the headlines within, I don't know, the last 2 years, plastics has had a really bad name. We've had some very disturbing images of plastics in our environment, specific ocean plastics. There's been a lot of talk about eliminating single-serve plastics. And if there's anything that COVID-19 has done specifically for plastics, it's reminded us of the hygienic and disposability aspects of plastics, specifically single-serve plastics. And there's an appropriate time and there's appropriate applications for that. So we see this headline from Bloomberg a couple of weeks ago, and that is, I think, is a good reminder to all of us that plastics do serve a very healthy and safe purpose in our culture and in the marketplace. We have been asked a lot about if we can provide resin to go towards the manufacturing of PPE. While we do hold letters of no objection from FDA for our natural and some of our other resin products, those specifically are not recommended for medical use. And so we are pursuing that with FDA. It's a very long and stringent certification process. And so we've really been in the wait and see time to really just see if this is something that we needed to jump on. I think as all of us can testify, we had no idea, we couldn't imagine that we would find ourselves here still in the quarantine and in this, the status that we're in. So we are going to be pursuing that. We've also been asked about the likelihood that we could recycle PPE. That is not something that we historically have done, but we as everyone is trying to find our role, how we can support our country in this, support our communities in this, beyond being a major supply chain partner. So we have partnered with our local university here. Troy University has a materials for manufacturing science department, and they are a research arm. They don't manufacture anything, but we are a partner of theirs, and they have received some federal grant money to explore the likelihood of recycled plastic, both in PPE, the manufacturing of PPE, and being able to recycle that. So that is something that we are just now beginning. I hope we can report that we've had some success with that. And then finally, I just wanted to list some resources here for you that we have relied on. Susan mentioned ISRI early on as an advocate for getting recycling considered as a manufacturing essential business. And ISRI, certainly their website is full of COVID-19. They have a webinar on something different every day, multiple times a day, I think. They even have guidance posters, operational type of stuff that you can print out to post around in your facility. They have a dashboard there so you can see what's happening state and local as far as those policies go and how they are considering recycling if it's an essential business. And then also I mentioned APR as the voice specifically for plastics recycling, always a great resource. And they are having some podcasts and doing some legislative updates to keep us all updated specifically on plastics. So that is it for our plastics perspective right now on COVID-19. I look forward to hearing your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was really interesting about the PPE. Fascinating. We'll be interested to see where that ends up going for you. Before I turn it over, move away from plastic and into cans, we have one more survey that we'd like to do, poll that we'd like to do. Has your household waste stream changed? So their options are significantly more trash, but recycling is the same, more recycling, but trash the same, more trash and recycling, no change, not sure. Give it a couple more seconds. We'll see how we do here. Has your household waste stream changed? So we've got 20%, pretty evenly. No significant change is the highest. 28% more trash and recycling, being home all day. Significantly more recycling, but less trash is next. More trash, but recycling is the same, and then not sure. So it's interesting. It's a fairly even split, at least in the top three there. Great. Well, thank you. Well, now we're going to move on to Scott Breen. Scott is the Vice President of Sustainability at the Can Manufacturing Institute, which represents U.S. can manufacturers and suppliers. His responsibilities include promoting food and beverage cans as the leading circular package, making sure federal and state policies support an efficient recycling system, recognizing the can's sustainability advantages, and leading the industry's efforts to increase the recycling rate of cans. Scott, it's your turn. You're up.
All right, thank you, Susan. So hi, everyone. Like Susan said, I'm Scott Breen, VP of Sustainability at the Can Manufacturers Institute. So we're a trade association, represent U.S. metal can manufacturers and their suppliers. Our members produce more than 100 billion food, beverage, and general line cans each year. And I'm going to explain how with the can's existing circular system, there's a strong connection between recycling and can manufacturing. And the best evidence of that strong connection is our high amount of recycled content. So there we go. So when you drink out of a US beverage can, what you're holding on average is made of 73% recycled material. This is measured by a regular survey of all the leading aluminum suppliers. So let's dive deeper into that 73% recycled content number. 13 grams, that's the average weight of an aluminum beverage can. And the breakdown of that is in the top right of the slide. So hopefully you can see that. The 27% is made of primary aluminum, virgin material, but then 43% on average is made from used beverage can, what I call UBC scrap. 7% is non-UBC post-consumer scrap. So there's a total of 50% post-consumer material in the average US aluminum beverage can. And then 23% is post-industrial scrap. If people are interested, there's more information on recycled content and the can industry's sustainable key performance indicators. Recycled content is just one of those in the KPI report that the Aluminum Association and CMI put out each year. If you just Google 2019 KPI aluminum can, you'll see it. Now, in the bottom right is a stat that gives you a sense of the scale of aluminum can recycling. We recycle more than 5 million aluminum beverage cans in the United States every hour. So it's 45 billion cans every year in the US, and those cans are worth $800 million. Of the aluminum beverage cans that are recycled in the US, 95% of them get turned into new cans. So there's a lot of can-to-can recycling going on. And that's why we have this high level of recycled content. And it's why we're the textbook example of the circular economy. So with cans, no need to wait for new infrastructure or new technology. We already recycle cans at scale. It's really just a matter of getting more cans collected to feed into this existing system. But sadly, with coronavirus, we're seeing less used beverage cans flowing through that existing circular system. So, went one too many. So, how do I go back? Oh, Jen's got me, I think. Okay. Did I go back? Let's see. Yep. All right. So, these are some numbers showing you the drop in the UBC flow. So let's first look at a couple deposit states. These are the states where when you buy a can or a PET bottle or a glass bottle, you pay a certain amount, and then when you return it, you get that back. These states are important since 40% of recycled cans come from just those 10 US deposit states. So to give you a sense of disruption in those states, I've heard that there was a drop of 50 to 80% in UBC flows in Michigan and California. That's a big deal. In California, they recycle 20 million cans a day. So if there's that kind of disruption, that's a lot of cans not coming back to us. I've also read that in Oregon, they've seen a 45% drop in material generally, even with the Oregon Beverage Recycling Cooperative operating standalone redemption centers. So given our high levels of recycled content, this drop in UBC flows means we won't be able to make can sheet with the same kind of inputs as we have been. And we're proud of that high recycled content. We want to maintain it. And there's several reasons for that. So high recycled content gives us both an environmental and an economic impact. On the environmental front, there's more than 90% less greenhouse gas emissions, more than 90% less energy use when our cans are made from recycled material. On the economic front, we have a forthcoming report on how the aluminum can is driving the entire recycling system. And it's going to show that in non-deposit states, aluminum cans represent 33% of a typical MRF's revenue, MRF being that where the single stream recyclables go to be sorted out. We also know from the Recycling Partnership's 2020 State of Curbside report that of the recyclable material generated at single family homes, if you look at all that material, that recycled material at single family home, only 3% by weight is UBCs, used beverage cans, because we don't weigh much, but those cans represent nearly half of the revenue. Also, more generally, secondary aluminum processing, basically recycling of aluminum, accounts for a lot of direct jobs, more than 10,000. So having cans continue to flow through the system is important to maintain these positive environmental and economic impacts via making can sheet with high recycled content. And this can sheet is needed now to make essential food and beverage containers during this crisis. So this is a statement we put out, CMI put out, explaining why we're essential. It says, during a time when outsized demand for everyday canned foods, beverages, and disinfectant products is straining supply chains, can manufacturers need to be able to continue manufacturing ironclad containers that supply quality food and sanitizing products to American consumers. And the sales numbers reflect how much people need cans. If you compare beverage can shipments of March 2019 to March 2020, they're up 15%. If you compare year-to-date 2020 to year-to-date 2019, it's up 8.3%. And I haven't talked too much about steel food cans yet. I'm sure many people are using those. They also have a relatively high amount of recycled content compared to other kinds of food packaging, up to 35%. And it's important for them to get the feedstock too. And with food cans, I've read canned tuna sales are up 200%. I've had some canned tuna recently. And Campbell's soup sales are up 59%. So with cans, we have a container that, like the others on the webinar today, is providing essential food and beverage packaging. We want to keep making these cans with our typical high levels of recycled content. But the disruptions in recycling is causing decreased UBC flows that make it very difficult to keep up with that high level of recycled content as we meet the surging demand. So with that, Susan, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, we want cans in our MRF, so we love the fact that this is such a great contributor to the circular economy, and thank you so much. That was just great. Next and last but not least, we are going to move to Scott DeFife, who became president of the Glass Packaging Institute in August of 2019 after serving as vice president of government affairs for the Plastics Industry Association, where he led the federal, state, and regulatory teams and worked to help upgrading the U.S. domestic recycling infrastructure. Prior to being at Plastics, Scott worked for the National Restaurant Association and the Securities Industry and Financial Markets Association. Scott, it's yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Susan. I'm going to keep focused on the slides here during my presentation and turn on video if we have some Q&A at the end. Thanks for having me. And like Susan mentioned, I saw that same video, was very happy to see source separated curbside glass in the drop-off on that video as it was making its way around the internet Twitterverse. Let me talk to you about the essential nature for glass and glass in the recycling stream and glass in the manufacturing process, recycled glass in the manufacturing process. Much like Scott Breen was sharing, glass is already an essential part of the standard batch mix for glass containers around the country, averaging right now about 35% of any glass package, bottle, jar, food jars that you have is likely going to be recycled content. And also, as Scott Breen was mentioning, as Susan has mentioned, a majority, probably close to 60% of the material that makes it back into bottles and jars is coming from the deposit states. And since those deposit states enforcement is turned off right now, the retailers are not doing as much of the redemption. The redemption laws are still in place, but the retailers are not doing as much redemption, except for Michigan, which has suspended its bottle drop rooms, and that is having a significant impact on the supply of cullet that is going through most of the processing operations across the country. So it's essential that we start to pick that up and find other outlets and do what we can to improve the amount of glass that is captured in the MRF and the recycling stream. We worked very much along with everyone else to ensure that that glass container operations and our supply chain at GPI, we represent the entire supply chain that goes into glass containers, were deemed essential. Usually in the food and beverage, the over 90% of the glass packaging in the United States is for food and beverage of one sort or another, not just our alcoholic beverage friends, but other food and beverage. And as many others have noted, grocery sales and packaging demand is, through the roof right now due to the shift in consumer purchasing habits away from on-premise to grocery and delivery. We did significant outreach to the states, the governors, and the state officials where we had glass plants and cullet processing to talk about the essential nature of the entire supply chain and to point out the need to continue to move the glass through the recycling system during this time of crisis. I think it was, as Susan mentioned at the beginning, it really is a key opportunity for us to make that connection with the consumer and with, quite honestly, many public officials who don't realize necessarily how important that the recycled glass is to making new glass bottles and jars. Here's the general landscape across the country. You can see many facilities in the CERTIC territory, but the bottle deposit states are there in red. I can tell you that quality issues and supply chains drive the material that's from many of those bottle deposit states east of the Mississippi down to the plants in the Southeast. And here's one of the issues that we want to talk about. This was already a challenge for glass before the COVID response, and we are looking at this as a potential opportunity to work with everybody to improve glass recovery in the United States and make this educational opportunity sink in to everyone. While I said that about 60% of the cullet that makes it back into bottles and jars across the country is coming from the deposit states. This is the flow chart of the material in the non-deposit states, okay? So this doesn't represent or include the material that's coming from the deposit states. This is in our non-deposit states. And you can see there is a significant amount of the glass going directly into landfill, or after it does go through the MRF process, even after it fits into several of the different industries, not just glass containers, but in fiberglass insulation or mineral replacement, much of that is also ending up back in landfill as cover, so that almost 66% of the glass material that is going through curbside is not necessarily getting recycled back into products, and only 13% of that is making its way back into glass containers. What can we do to increase that? And especially in this crisis, what can we do to increase that? You can see that even drop-off glass, is likely to go through the processor to hit the end markets into more of the packaging and the durable goods through this. So we want to talk about ways to improve the quality of the material that's going through the MRF stream and to increase the amount of material that's going through drop-off. As I said, every challenge is an opportunity. At GPI, we are actively exploring what I'll call emergency alternative collection solutions. There's a picture there of one of the purple bins that we have been working to help communities in Northern Virginia install over the course of the past year. Our member companies and our efforts to help promote the glass drop-off in Northern Virginia. That material is now going into glass bottles and jars. It is one of the things that the communities found in Northern Virginia is that the quality was very high. The consumers the residents were very adept at making sure that we got good quality material in those bins, and the quality was so high that the value of that feedstock is tremendous, and it is making its way back into bottles and jars. In addition, I serve on the leadership committee for the Glass Recycling Coalition, and one of the key programs that I wanted to highlight for the GRC is our new MRF glass certification program, which measures effective glass cleaning. Very valuable to MRF's bidding municipal contract. We launched it last year meeting these standards, which are ISRI and ISO standards for MRF for the glass certification, is going to be very helpful at making sure that that material gets into higher beneficial uses. A GRC 2018 study showed that just short of 30%, so only about nearly 30% of the MRFs had glass cleaning equipment. So we would like to work with you on improving that. And if you cannot get the glass cleaning equipment going, or if that's not a viable alternative for your community, we want to work with you on possibly doing some, at least especially during the COVID crisis, let's test out some pilot drop-off programs. As Susan said, I was also recently installed as the president of the Glass Recycling Foundation, which is taking in donations, third-party donations, and foundation grants to help complement and match grants to help install cleaning equipment or other interventions to improve the glass stream through the curbside program. Thank you and let's see, I think that is my last. Yep, that is the last slide, so thank you very much.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see if we can do this. So I've got, there we go. I've got some questions of the panelists, if I could. I'll start, and then what I'd like to do is offer, if you have questions, please enter them into the chat box, and if we have time, we'll try to get to as many as we can. So I'm going to start off, though. I've got one. I'm going to start with Sean, but I'm actually going to pose this to all of you. And if you want to put on your videos, for those of you who are interested, that'd be great. We could kind of pretend like we're all together at a table chatting. So when did you realize that you needed to start working to ensure that recycling was included in the list of essential services? When did that kind of light bulb go off? And why don't we just go down the line? We can start with Sean, and if anybody else wants to add to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd say, I'm looking over at the calendar, I'd say it was on Monday, March 16th. And I think that was the weekend that New York established a shelter-in-place order. So we realized pretty quick that we needed to get ahead of it. A little bit of discussion a couple weeks prior about making sure that we'd be up and running and would be considered essential. Although I got to say that the word essential didn't come to mind until that week of March 15th, 16th, when I started doing a little bit more research on it, started talking to our government affairs folks, and started spending some time with other counterparts in the industry.
That sounds right. That's right. And anything in particular, just the news of what was going on, what you're seeing, and just anticipating changes to your feedstock flow?
I think it was when they established a shelter-in-place order, we were reading what some of the verbiage was and how it would affect manufacturing, and we realized that we needed to get ahead of it and start talking to folks. I think it was that same week that we put a letter together to hand to employees so that they could give it to anybody that would question why they were out and about.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about you, Greg? So I think you might be on mute.
Yep, I was, sorry, thanks.
There we go.
The impetus for it was what was going on in California. I believe it was the Bay Area, and it was at least in mid to early March, seeing the shelter-in-place order take place and realizing and watching the course of world events and how the virus was proliferating, we realized we needed to do something to keep our facilities open. So we immediately drafted letters specifically for California and that locale, and then one step further within the following week to prepare for all of the other locations in the country because we had specific cities within states, municipalities that were issuing shelter-in-place orders, and we needed our plant managers to have those letters distributed so that when things happen, the employees wouldn't be stopped and prevented from coming to work. So timing was similar.
Stephanie, how about you? I appreciated your comments about ISRI and the work that they did. I know we certainly worked with them as well, but from your perspective, what was your light bulb moment?
Sure. Well, like I said, we immediately started receiving. We are located in Alabama, and fortunately or unfortunately, we were one of the last states to start seeing confirmed cases in our state. We were one of the last states to have to put a shelter-in-place order. But we had already received letters from our suppliers with them naming us as essential suppliers for them. And thankfully, with just a history of a really great relationship with our local government, our state government, there's never been any question that we are considering a manufacturer. And so we were able to really just kind of slide into that category. And we also issued letters to our employees just in case there was any trouble with them getting to and from work. And to date, we haven't experienced any.
Great. Scott Breen, I don't see your face on my screen anyway, but I think you're there if you want to go next. I wonder if we lost him.
Because you used my panelist thing and we're like both Scott Breen right now, but that's okay. So
okay. Got it.
We put out a statement on March 16th saying that we're essential. I think like Sean was saying, we saw the lingo, we used it, and we just knew because we used so many cans and we were seeing disruption in places like California, we had to put out a statement very quickly. So.
I didn't even notice my name was by my face. Your name was by my face. Scott, your five.
Yeah, like Greg, we started to talk about this with respect to California. We have there's several glass plants out in California, and when the Bay Area counties started talking about doing shelter in place, even before the statewide shelter in place, we were interacting with state officials and our members out there, and then that quickly escalated into the federal CISA guidelines, and especially with New York and Pennsylvania. We had a lot of work to do in Pennsylvania as they kind of put out their own list of essential life-sustaining businesses, and but we're able to make sure that they understood the glass plant operations in Pennsylvania and the supply chain facilities in Pennsylvania. It wasn't just if you had a glass plant in your state, but if you had a recycling center or processing or, part of the supply chain there. And so I would say it escalated quickly that week. That was a hard week on essential operations with letters to all of the governors.
I'm going to do a lightning round for each of you, really quick if you could. Have there been any nice surprises that you've seen over the last couple of weeks? And then I got one more question we'll try to get through. We'll slip in quickly if we can, then we'll be done. Nice surprises. Go ahead, Sean.
Okay, yeah, nice surprises. Yeah, I think that we're going to have safer work environments come out of it. We've done a lot of things in the MRFs to make our employees safe, and a lot of it's surrounding knowing where you're at and what you're doing and how to control yourself. And I think we'll see safety improve.
That's excellent. Greg?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a surprise, but we've been very pleased with the reaction from our employees, the support and dedication to behave as work families with the social distancing. They're consistently showing up for work. The very low level of infections we have, I think, is a tribute to how hard people are working to abide by what is necessary to keep them safe.
That's great. Thanks. Stephanie?
Yeah, I would agree with both of those points that we certainly have seen some silver lining in all of this. And again, I mentioned this earlier in my presentation, but the conversation around plastics is really changing dramatically. So I think that is certainly a nice surprise, is that maybe we are reevaluating the role that plastics has to play in our society.
Great. Scott B?
Yeah, so one, I would say, like others are saying, the fact that we were able to meet the surge in demand. We have 28,000 people that work directly for can manufacturers, so I think it's a testament to them that we were able to do that. one thing that I think is going to come from this is rethinking our deposit systems so that they are more efficient, maybe more contactless, things like reverse vending machines. One thing I haven't realized to this extent was how many people rely on deposit systems for supplemental income. I was listening to a podcast the other day about encampments of homeless people, and they were saying one of the things that's made our life even that much more difficult is we can't go around and collect cans to get extra income. Thousands of people in New York City, same thing. So we need to make those systems better so the average consumer can return it more easily in crises like these, but also people that rely on that system for extra income.
That's great. Great. Scott Device.
Yeah, I'll echo what Scott said about the value of the material and really reaffirm the public's support for glass. But more than anything else, I've been really pleasantly surprised by the outreach and the creative problem solving that's going on across communities and the interest in working with us to collect more glass.
That's great. Well, we're out of time, top of the hour, but I'm going to turn my last question over to the audience, to our attendees, to kind of take away from this to think about. How can we, as governments and private entities, best communicate the importance of recycling, and what can we do now, given kind of where we are and where we think we're going, to encourage more better recycling? So I think this is a moment in time. We have an enormous opportunity to really further our recycling. And so I leave it with you all to be thinking about how we can use this and really grow our recycling programs. So I want to thank